Okay, so in this next section, what we're going to be talking about is the job of the probiotics or those good bacteria. One of the most important functions of those good bacteria is the fact that they are the first line of defense against many toxins that we consume, whether they be food toxins, environmental toxins, chemical toxins. They are there to make sure that those toxins do not touch the villi and therefore do not enter our bodies. One thing you'll notice on this slide, let me get my pointer again. Oh, where'd it go? Oh, there it is. Okay, when you're talking about these three items right here, the probiotics are actually a natural agent, a natural antibiotic, a natural antiviral, and a natural antifungal agent. So whenever you consume foods that have any kind of a contamination issue, like maybe they're slightly contaminated with salmonella or E. coli or listeria or something like that, if you have a sufficient amount of probiotics in your gut, they will naturally begin to kill off all of those bacteria that have come in just from simply eating various foods that are imported from various countries. We cannot always ensure the safety of our foods. Um, another thing is that there are a mixture in your gut of both good bacteria and bad bacteria. So we naturally have a small amount of E. coli in our guts at all times. We also naturally have a small amount of yeast in our guts at all times. And so what happens is the yeast and the bad bacteria like E. coli infections and other types of bacteria are constantly battling with the good bacteria or the probiotics for room to survive and to colonize in your gut. Typically what would happen is the probiotics, there should be enough of them to where you can make sure that they have grown, they have colonized the region to such a degree to where it's almost impossible for yeast and E. coli to get a foothold into that environment and to grow and to thrive. So naturally, large amounts of probiotics will keep yeast and E. coli and other bacteria at bay, along with secreting the enzymes that they secrete to kill viruses, bacteria, and funguses. Down here, what you'll notice is it also creates a physical barrier. Remember, we talked about all this blue, slimy, mucusy stuff. That is there for a purpose. It is there to try to protect, provide a big old layer or a barrier to protect those fingers from any harm that might be done to them from bacteria, fungus, viruses, chemical toxins, environmental toxins, pesticides that are on your food, chemical additives that are in your food, such as preservatives. All of those things have a potential to destroy your villi. And so, in an effort to keep those things from destroying it, those probiotics secrete that barrier. If you do not have adequate probiotics in your gut, you will not have that barrier, and your villi are exposed to a lot of different toxins that can eventually break them down, as we will see later on. The other thing that the probiotics can do is they actually create a certain pH or acidity within the gut. And that acidity is ideal for being able to metabolize certain vitamins. Iron is one vitamin in particular that will assimilate properly if it's in a slightly acidic environment. So the probiotics will keep things or will keep the environment in the proper acidity to be able to utilize more vitamins and more minerals and make sure that they are absorbing properly. So on this next slide, we talked about some of the first one, providing a protective layer against damaging bacteria, toxins, undigested food. Sometimes we do not have enough enzymes. In fact, many times, many individuals are lacking enzymes that they need to really digest their food properly. We'll talk about later on how some of that undigested food can seep into the gut, and once it seeps into the gut, it can go up to the brain, cause different mental disturbances and things like that. So naturally, the mucus should keep undigested food out of the bloodstream. If it gets into the bloodstream, it creates a very allergic reaction in many people. Parasites are another thing. You might not think of parasites in food, but actually meat does tend to contain a lot of various parasites, and if you have enough probiotics, they will be able to kill off the worms, or the Giardia is another one, other bugs, if you will, that act as parasitic type bugs. If you're moving down, it appropriately engages the immune system. If the probiotics sense that there is enough of a bacteria or a viral or fungal infection coming in, and it's just too much for them to handle, it will communicate with the immune system. Remember back here that this yellow line here, this is your lymph system, and when it goes up into the villi, that is your lacteal, that is your immune system, and 70 to 80% of your immune system is in your gut. The reason why it's there is because that is the number one region as to where we tend to get sick first. When you are breathing in certain bacteria or funguses, or when you eat food that is contaminated, when you touch surfaces in which somebody else has touched that surface who's sick, then you put your hands to your mouth, eat something, that's usually how we get sick. So if you have a good amount of probiotics there, you're less likely to get those infections. But when you are inundated with, say, the flu bug or something like that, then the probiotics can communicate with the immune system and say, hey, you better kick in. We have to put our army all out here and fight this off, and they will properly engage that immune system. Next, if you go down, we talked about normalizing the gut pH for optimal vitamin absorption, neutralizing out food toxins. We live in a day and age, our food is loaded with chemicals, additives, preservatives, food colorings, things that are not naturally found in food. And all of these have a potential to harm our cells because they're foreign to our cells. And so adequate amounts of probiotics will help to neutralize out those toxins before they can get into our bloodstream and create more damage. One of the most important things that the probiotics does outside of keeping bacterial, viral, and fungal infections at bay is that they pretty much are responsible for taking care of the villi. So going back to our picture here, again, that blue mucousy secretion there, that is literally bathing those villi. And if you can bathe those villi, you are protecting them. Down here in this region where these dark purple cells are, these are called crypt cells, and they are responsible for making new absorptive cells. So the layer of cells that you see all along this villi are produced from those cryptic cells. In order for those cryptic cells to work properly, they need to be fed. The probiotics literally feed the cryptic cells, which then creates more cells and then creates stronger villi. Therefore, you're able to absorb more nutrients and get more from your food. So if you do not have adequate probiotics, your fingers are not being fed. They're not being cleaned off either. If there were infections that were to get in this region, the probiotics would hopefully take care of those infections. They help to keep the brush border, which you can see the brush border along here, the purple hairy stuff sticking up. It's important that that is healthy and long and sticking up like that because, again, it's optimizing nutrient absorption. If you cannot absorb the proper nutrients, your fat-soluble molecules, your vitamins, E, C, A, you will get sick because your immune system needs to be fed by those things. But all of those first require a good, strong probiotic layer. So those are just a few of the more important responsibilities of the probiotics. Next, we're going to see what happens when they are torn down, when they die off, and how that can happen.